And welcome everyone to another edition of Tanya Talks. I'm your host, Tanya Ricketts. And tonight we are joined by Dr. Shar Rai. We are going to, so welcome. Welcome this evening. And we are going to be discussing We Become What We Believe. So just before we get started tonight with Dr. Shar Rai, I'm going to just share a little bit of background about who you are. And you are a chiropractor.
Yep.
And a corporate wellness specialist, and also the co-founder of the Empowerment Project. So you're an empowerment facilitator. And I know you do a lot of good work in that arena because I've heard a lot of people talking about it. So congratulations to you guys.
Thank you.
You can also find Dr. Shar Rai at drsharrai.ca. And I will put that information at the end of I'll say it again at the end of the show, and I'll also put that in the comment section for anybody that wants to have a look and check it out. So welcome this evening. I'm looking forward to our talk this evening, our conversation, where we get to talk about who we are.
And how you know what? I'm honored that you've invited me to be your opener for April. So
yes.
I'm very excited and honored, Tanya, always.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? I saw it. I didn't, and transparency is I didn't realize it. And then when I realized it, I was like, how beautiful is this going to be? Because I know that you've got such a depth about you and such a warmth, but a depth that really I think that we can all learn a lot from in the arena of knowing thyself. So share a little bit with us how you personally came to understand your belief system.
Well, I think that for me, the catalyst was the birth of my first child. So, I think this is a great question because when you have to take care of somebody else, you realize that you have to put a lot of yourself aside, or at least I did. I felt like I needed to put a lot of myself aside to really be focused on this beautiful little being that had entered my life. And she was so interesting to me. And I always say, God gives you things that you need. And I had a daughter first because I believe she was the one that was going to teach me about what I needed to work on what I needed to work on for myself, but also to understand who I was, right? So very, very easy, clean story. After she was born and the midwives gave her to me. And so she's lying in my arms. And the first things that I mumbled to her were, I hope you're nothing like me. That was the first thing that I said to her. I hope you're nothing like me. I hope that, you're smart, you're beautiful, that you're confident, and that you have a healthy self-esteem. And so, here's me, wishing all of these things on my daughter. And I'm like, you're going to be nothing like me. You're going to be so different.
And you just saw my facial expression in shock.
Absolutely. And you know what? Most people are in shock when I say that. But what she made me realize at that moment is all of the things that I needed to work on. And if you want to call them shortcomings, you can call them shortcomings. But she was the person that made me realize that I was wishing things for her that I had no idea. I didn't know what it was like to feel smart, or to feel beautiful, or to feel confident. Even though, I went to chiropractic college, I have a doctor title, and everyone, like you were telling me earlier today, you're so articulate, you speak so well. And, I've always sort of been that person, but deep down inside, something wasn't jiving. Right. So we can be who we need to be. We can put on a show for whoever it is out there. But then when you really have to tune in to who you are as an individual, the story can look very different, right? So, that self-talk that you have, that idea in your head of who you really are, that can be really different. So my firstborn was the person that said, okay, Mom, here I am. she came out with a mirror, actually. I'm like, here you go. Look at yourself in the mirror. And I want you to identify yourself right now. And all of the things that I wished for her, I was not. So she was that catalyst. She was the person that said to, that basically gave me permission to start doing some soul searching, because really, who was I to teach her how to be confident? Who was I to teach her how to feel beautiful? Who was I to teach her how to have a healthy self-esteem when I didn't even know what that was? And very interestingly enough, Tanya, I've shared this story many times. And when I used to share this story, it used to bring me to tears. It used to bring me to tears because of the process, the grueling process I had to go through to peel back layers of who I was. I can sit here and I can tell you the story now because I can confidently say that I've done the work. I've done a lot of work. And so she was basically that person, that little being, that little soul that said, Mom, it's time for you to step up and get onto that, get on that path and get on that journey. And so I was really fortunate because I had enough resources around me to understand where I needed to first, where I needed to go first in order
Mhm.
to make this happen. And I actually came across a patient of mine. And it's so funny because, like I said, I really truly believe that God gives you what you need, and people are put in your path for a reason. And
Mhm.
so it was a patient I was seeing at one of the companies that I do work with, and she had a book called You Can Heal Your Life.
Mhm.
So You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'm going to say you probably know that book
Yeah.
well. And one of the things that she, or actually not one of the things, but the main gist of the book was basically rewriting your story, or rewriting some of that self-talk. So there's some of that stuff that you have going on in your head. How can you say it differently so it makes you feel like you love yourself a little bit more? Because I wasn't in a place where I did love myself. And she talks a lot about doing mirror work. So her big thing was affirmations, standing in front of a mirror, saying things like, I am beautiful, I am smart, I am worthy, I am valued. And can I just tell you how hard that was? Like when you're starting in a place where you dislike yourself so much, right? And for you to stand up in front of a mirror, and it sounded really funny to a lot of people, right? Because I
Mhm.
mean, this book is, I don't even know how old it is, but, and her work has become so much more prominent now. But, this journey of mine started 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago, because that's almost how old my daughter is. And so 18 years ago, when you're actually doing mirror work and you're telling people, I'm doing this, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm saying these things to myself, people look at you like you kind of have three heads. Like, what are you doing exactly?
Yes, I agree with you. 20 years ago, when almost 20 years ago, you're right. You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay out, at least in my circle,
Mhm.
you look like you were outcasted. Right?
Well, what's really funny about the whole process is that when I started doing affirmations, it actually reminded me of a Saturday Night Live episode with Stuart Smalley. And I could have just aged myself saying that, but Stuart Smalley was a character that did affirmations in front of a mirror. And so I actually thought it was so funny when I started, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm Stuart Smalley. So but you know what? I will tell you how difficult it was for me to first do it. Like for me to look at myself in the mirror, in the eye, and say, I am beautiful. Like, not you are beautiful. I had to say, I am beautiful. Like, I had to really reflect on who I was. And so by saying those words, I became very emotional. Like, it was very hard for me to sit in front of a mirror and say these things. But you know what? It was the start of my process. My daughter was the person that made me not want to quit. That said, no, you know what? You're going to do this because if you want her to be better, you have to be better, right? Like, how do you teach someone when you haven't taught yourself, right? Like, right? Like, you don't expect a math
Can't
teacher.
give away what you don't have.
Exactly. And you don't expect a math teacher to show up in a classroom and say, by the way, I'm going to teach you, calculus, but I only know math up to my times tables. Like, how do you don't do that. You can't do that. So it was really about me learning and teaching myself how to love myself by doing affirmations so I could teach her the same things. And so what's really interesting through this entire process is, my brain is very scientific. So here I am doing these affirmations, and Louise Hay says 21 days to start changing the way that you feel about yourself. And so I'm doing these affirmations, and day 8 rolls around, day 10 rolls around, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is crazy. Why am I standing in front of a mirror saying all these things about myself? Like, this is complete BS. Like, I was, from being so engulfed in it the first 10 days, 8 days, to going, this is just a load of crap. Like, why am I even doing this? Like, I started feeling really emotional and very irritable and very angry. Like, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm the defect. I'm the defective one, that this is not going to work.
Isn't it the default always? Like, we're always in the default of putting ourselves down
Exactly.
as human beings.
Exactly. And so I thought to myself, this has worked for everybody, including my beautiful patient that brought the book in for me. But I must be the default. Like, I'm the defect. It's just not going to work for me.
Right.
And so, I didn't stop there. I'm like, okay, no, you know what? I looked at my daughter and I thought to myself, I can't stop. I have to figure out why this is happening to me. And so my brain is very scientific, like I said. And I started diving into the works of Dr. Joe Dispenza. And if you're familiar with any of his work, Evolve Your Brain was the first book. I can see it on my bookshelf just as I look in the reflection of my mirror. It was the first book on science on science and scientific research that backed up, our thought processes. And what I learned is that our brain is very neuroplastic. So our brain has the ability to change, and for neurons to actually form these amazing networks, but they grow according to the thoughts that you feed it. So all my life, so I had my daughter at the age of, I was 31 when I had her. So, there's been multiple years that I've been feeding this garbage to myself, that I'm not smart and that I'm not beautiful and I'm not confident and I'm not really valued and worthy. And I needed to change that self-talk. So I had created this amazing neural network that my body fed off of. Like, I was just feeding off of that thought process. I was producing hormones that fed that thought process. But that's what I needed to change. So when you start engaging in positive self-talk, when you start engaging in a different dialogue where you are telling yourself, I am smart, I am beautiful, I'm worthy, I am valued, you're producing a new neural network. And you're also producing new hormones that are being, basically created and dumped into your body, right? So now your thoughts are the same as the way you're feeling, and the way that you feel, it feeds your thoughts.
And I'm happy you say that. If we could touch on that just for a second, where, the brain, we're feeding our brain new information, but a lot of times we're not feeling it. And this was the big hack that I said to everybody was, it's not man think it, so it should be, it's how we feel it. And I think that what we're feeding our brain is just an indicator. Like, the feelings really are at the core of what creating the change is. It sends a signal to the brain, it releases the chemical, it sends the energy out into the airways, is the way that I always understood it. And a lot of times people are going into the mirror and they're doing these affirmations. And the reason why I think that they suggest going 21 days, it's because it takes a moment for it to connect to the emotions.
Exactly.
And people are like, it's not working. And people can do affirmations for past 21 days. And I always say, well, what are you feeling when you do it? Because I'm resonating with you looking in the mirror. I'm beautiful. And it's like, but I don't feel beautiful. Right. And it's like, I'm lying to myself. That's not true. And I'm not allowing myself to actually feel that emotion of, yes, I feel beautiful, not I am anymore. Like I actually feel beautiful.
Right.
I am beautiful. So it's that always asking, do I feel it? Do I feel abundant? I
Right.
am abundant, right?
Exactly. And that's something that I know that you work on with a lot of your coaching clients. That's so important to be able to connect the heart and the brain. And actually, even in some of the other books that I've read of Joe Dispenza, who happens to be a chiropractor too,
Right, yes.
has a great story, a great story. But he talks about brain and heart coherence, right? So
Yeah,
it's one thing to think something, but when you attach a feeling to it, it amplifies it, right?
yeah,
And so that the whole idea of doing affirmations initially for a lot of people is to come up with affirmations that feel believable first, right?
right.
So um I maybe it's not I am beautiful, but maybe it's I'm pretty, and I am getting better at math, or I am building my self-confidence, right? So you have to be in a state where it's believable enough that you can create the emotion behind it.
Yes.
So when you're in that process, and I wanted to make this point very clear, because when you are in that process of changing your physiology, because really that's what happens, you end up changing your physiology. What you have to remember is we can become addicted to our thoughts, and the biochemical download and the physiology, the same way that we can become addicted to an external drug, like, so whether it's marijuana or alcohol or cigarettes or sugar, right? What happens is when you are changing your thought process, and these old neural connections are falling apart, and you're no longer feeding your body that chemical concoction, your body goes through withdrawal. So at day
Mhm.
10, when I was feeling like, "Oh, this is useless, I'm the default, nothing's going to work for me," Joe's work, Dr. Dispenza's work, is what brought me back into the affirmation 21-day challenge, because it made me realize, oh my gosh, my body is going through withdrawal. What are withdrawal symptoms? Withdrawal symptoms are irritability, anger, frustration. You're emotional, you're crying all the time, right? You can't talk to anybody without wanting to rip their head off, right? And that's what happened to me. Like, I was, and everyone still has their head, granted, in my house, but that was what was happening. I was so angry and so irritable because I stopped feeding that chemical process. I started building a new one. And so that took me over the hump. That took me from 10 days to 15 days to 20 days to 17 years later, where
I'm in love right now, okay? Well, just because you're talking my language, okay? Because I always say to people, when we are looking, when events are happening in our life, and they're the unpleasant events, like we all have unpleasant events that happen, an easy way to get through it is to understand what your body's addicted to in that moment and why you're calling that event into your life, because you're addicted to the hormone and the chemical of the anger and the frustration. And when you can wake up to that, you can now have the opportunity to remove the emotion out of it and understand what's taking place so you can move through it quicker. So I really so appreciate, audience, listen to Dr. Ray, please, because this is what I've been working to communicate for years to people. And you're bringing it up in this conversation. I really appreciate you sharing this with the audience this evening.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you. I also share this with my patients and with my coaching clients as well. And I will, and the reason why I love the science, and I know that you love the science too, because this is why we're resonating so well together, is because when people start understanding how their body functions and why it needs certain things and why they behave the way that they behave. Like if you understand the science behind it, you're more inclined to participate in the process. So even with expressing gratitude, for example, a lot of people are like, well, why should I be grateful? I'm grateful for my house, I'm grateful for my car, grateful for the food on my table, grateful for my family. But when people start understanding that when you are grateful, you are changing the way that your brain functions. You are releasing melatonin, which is a hormone that allows you to feel calm and feel more relaxed. It helps you sleep better. When you are expressing gratitude, you stimulate parts of your brain that increase your metabolism. So who doesn't want that?
I was gonna say, like, so anybody out there that's looking to lose weight,
Right.
stimulate it with gratitude.
Exactly. So the thing is that again, when you're able to share the science behind it, people are like, oh, I understand now why this is so important, right? Because let's be honest, right? Science and spirituality, they've sort of fall on the same spectrum. And if you're ready to dive into that spiritual part of it and you can walk into it with blind faith, God bless you. Awesome, amazing. But a lot of people aren't ready to go there yet. So how do we get people on the spectrum? How do we get people on board to participate in these things? And so science has been a very big part. Like it's been a very big part of my life. It's always been my favorite subject. It's what I love teaching the most because it helps validate the tools and techniques that we use. Like even meditation. Like I will give you a very, very quick synopsis on meditation. So when you meditate, basically what happens is you decrease the gray matter in your amygdala, which is your stress center, right? So when you are stressed about something, the first place that we go is our amygdala, and we start acting out as a result of it. But when you engage in meditation, your prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain, that gray matter increases. And meditation gives you more cognitive control over your emotions because your amygdala now is shrinking, right? Like the actual gray matter is shrinking and you're not tapping into that space anymore. So again, when people start understanding that, right? Because meditation has been so woo woo and it's out there and I can't calm my mind. And, I don't want to, people think it's transcendental and it's not just transcendental. That's a form of meditation, but being able to focus and bring yourself back into a present moment and understand what happens to your brain when you engage in that presence is so beautiful.
Right.
Right?
I'm with you. You're talking my language. It's what I've been studying. I've been on this journey. I tell people from my teenage years, and back when I was a teenager. I won't date myself on the show right now. Back when I was studying this, like nobody was studying this, and it was really challenging for me to, speak with individuals because it was like I understood how to fuse the two worlds of the spiritual world and the scientific world together and let it make sense. With how we use our words, vibrations, everything, and what it does to the body and the cells and everything else, and bring that connection together. And, I can't say, I'm not going to suggest to anybody that it's easy. However, it does take work and it does take a level of awareness on how you're moving about to understand the science behind it. But when you can understand the science behind it, it is motivating and it is encouraging to understand that I say it, if you go to my website, you'll see it, you are your greatest asset. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that is because we haven't tapped into our human potential from the scientific aspect, tapping into all the resources that our body offers us in order to create a healthy life experience.
Yes, exactly. And so yeah, and so again, so you're using science with your clients as well, right? Because again, that's giving them a foundation to leap off of.
It's just easier to transition the emotional aspect of it
Yeah.
because we can disengage at that moment. I find in my experience of working with people, I find that when we understand the science behind it, then we can remove the emotional aspect of it from the negative aspect and make room to attach ourselves from an emotional space to the healthier aspect. So it allows us to transition easier and more quickly into where we want to, when we talk about the Joe Dispenza work, or the Neville Goddard work, or all those different Bernie Siegel and all those, I'm not sure if you read the book Power versus Force. And
It's on my bookshelf. Would you like me to?
right. So when we understand all of this, it allows us, and it's an easier, more harmonious transition, in my opinion. And I have evidence-based, to support evidence to support working with individuals, that when people can understand the science mixed with spirituality, it really is an easier transition into healing, to creating abundance. Like, it's just an easier transition into what's the word I'm looking, evolving or coming into our truth, or whatever that is. It's just an easier transition. So I so echo this again. I appreciate you bringing the science aspect into what we believe. We become what we believe, and understanding the emotion of the reason why we're experiencing some of the hardships we're experiencing is the emotional aspect that's attached to it, based on the addiction that we're requiring from whatever that is. And when we can wake up to what that is that we're looking for, and we're trying to feed ourselves through the addiction. I always say this saying, or I bring this aspect to it: whatever emotion our mother was feeling when she was carrying us, that was being released to us. So we come out into the world, and we're not in her room where she's feeling that emotion where it's feeding us. So all of a sudden we come out into the world and we still require it. So we invite all these events that continue the anger, the frustration, the pity, the victim, that sort of thing, in order for us to be fed from a chemical perspective.
I think that what you just said is the perfect segue into some of the Bruce Lipton work I've read, and I'm sure you're familiar with him as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he talks about. He's a father of epigenetics, and one of the things that he has taught me, and one of the reasons why I take all of this information out to students and my patients and my coaching clients, is that it's really important to understand that you are right. We are what we believe, and a lot of our belief system is actually developed between the ages of 0 to 7. And so a lot of people are like, what, 0 to 7? I don't remember. I don't even remember what I did between those ages. And yes, you're right. You don't remember. And the reason why you don't remember is because children between the ages of 0 to 7, their brain waves run a lot slower than adult brain waves, right? So right now, you and I are in a beta wave state, right? Where our brain waves are running a lot faster. We're in a conversation, it's focused, we're alert, we're concentrating. And then after, the next step down from beta state is the alpha state, right? So alpha state is a slower brain wave. It is where a lot of our creativity comes into place. We are able to come up with new solutions to problems because our brain waves slow down. It's our creative state, which I know you love.
Oh, I
Love
absolutely.
alpha state. I know you do. But the next state after that is theta. And theta is so slow. So theta state is actually the state that we are induced into when we are under hypnosis. Okay, so this is why we're so impressionable, and we see all those funny things where a hypnotist is able to get us to do all these funny things, like we're in a trance. And it's true, children are literally in that trance. Their brain waves are within the theta state, and it's actually called a hypnoidal state, not a hypnotic state, but a hypnoidal state. And so children, anything that they hear, they touch, they experience, they observe, all their entire experience becomes their programming. It becomes their blueprint. It becomes their subconscious mind. And
Right.
so as adults, we don't realize this, but 95% of our behavior is based on what we've learned between the ages of 0 to 7. So
And everybody, they say it so much, but what I think that people fail to realize is how the science works with that. And I think when they understand that aspect of it, it gives them an opportunity to change it. I got to ask this question for our audience on behalf of the audience. So, what would you suggest is the state of, so we know the creative state, but manifestation? Would you say it's the beta, the theta, the alpha? Where should our audience be moving towards,
it's the theta state.
and how, what is the best process in order to get there?
Okay, so let's start with theta for just a second. So
Okay.
theta is also the state that we tap into before we fall asleep. Okay, so theta state also is a state that is achieved through meditation, for example. Okay, so when we're able to slow our brain waves down enough to that theta state, we have also reached a point where we can manifest, right? So one of the best things to do is when you are listening to meditative music, and again, I would say listening to meditative music because again, there's certain frequencies that we can listen to that can bring us into that theta state, into that sort of trance-like state that I was describing. And if we focus on the things that we want to manifest at at that state or in that state, that's when they really start coming into fruition. That's when we start
Mhm.
actually seeing things show up in our life. But again, it has to be consistent, right? You can't do this once and then expect, well, I did this last night. How come I didn't win the lottery? Or, well, why hasn't this happened for me or that happened for me? You are reprogramming your brain. So we talk about the law of attraction. I know that you and I are very familiar with it. We're reprogramming the brain. So when we are reprogramming the brain, we are creating new neural networks. So these new neural networks are easier for us to access than when we are also in an awakened state, right?
Mhm.
So when we are in beta state, we're able to tap into that a lot more. And again, going back to the heart and brain coherence that Joe Dispenza was saying, if we can think it and if we can feel it, then we can manifest it, right? But
Mhm.
it starts with the subconscious because we also have to remove some old programs, some old blueprints in there to make room for the new stuff.
Right.
Does
So
that?
I'm gonna just make it some tangible, because I know me and you can really talk scientific,
Mhm.
and we get it. So just for the audience, if there's some simplistic ways, and share with me, add to whatever I'm saying here. Um, there are some simple ways. I have done this exercise with a lot of my clients where I've had them write out a reality as if it's already happened.
Yes.
And it's so funny when I watch people do this, because there's a huge resistance level that comes up. They don't, like what you said, like mirror work. They don't believe it, doesn't feel real. And I said, well, that's what you have to work on, is allowing yourself to surrender to the possibility of what it is, this reality you want to create, and then slow the brain down to get into that theta state and allow yourself. So were you capitalizing on all the senses that are in us, between the writing, the visual, making it concrete, using it in words, saying it in the mirror. So taking that written reality as if it is, saying that back in the mirror, going into that meditative state. I call it the void, and it's just the gap between coming out of this reality and allowing yourself to project into what you want to create, and that, amplifying, as you say it, whereas there's the brain and heart coherence, and it's all of that together. When you can use all the senses to move yourself into the reality of what you want, when they do feedback testing and they take the mind into the reality, it does actually happen at warp speed. And I'm saying that of experience. Right?
Like, be careful what you wish for.
Right. And when you add gratitude to it, I'm just going to put it out there that when you add gratitude to it, because you're in a very high frequency of gratitude and love, I call it like this cone where it's just, you're so grateful. It's like this vacuum, like you're sucking everything up.
Yeah.
When you say be careful what you wish for, it's like it comes better than you expected, more than you expected, bigger than what you could have imagined.
Yeah.
Because you're so open that your whole aura becomes this vacuum
Right.
to it all. It's amazing.
So
I think it's fun.
it is, especially when you know how to do, once you get into the routine and understanding how to do it. So, you know what, I was just going to say that for your audience member that was asking that question, I think one of the best ways to do it is actually take what you said, right? So you're writing down the things that you want to manifest in your life and recording it and putting it on repeat, putting it in your ears and falling asleep to it.
Oh,
Because,
yes.
right? So then what happens, because you can also read it, right? Because this is what I used to do before I understood that that I started getting comfortable with recording my voice and stuff like that on on my phone. But I used to read things before I went to bed. I used to read things the first thing as soon as I got home, I'd read my manifestation um sheet or whatever I had written down, whatever I wanted to create in my life. But it was just before I went to bed and just as I was rising, because you're still in that very creative, your brain is still very fertile and it's able to absorb so much more. But recording your voice, like actually taking a page, writing everything down, your affirmations, what you're grateful for, what you want to create in your life, and then listening to it on repeat as you fall asleep is probably one of the easiest ways to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And have fun. I'm a fun person. If you hear some of my shows, I'm like about fun and adventure because I think life is an adventure. I think it's absolutely fun and beautiful. Even in the middle of turmoils, I do admit that. But I think that adding the fun to it actually, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out, please. But that fun piece to it and the laughter piece and the curious piece to go with it, I think it just adds a little spice to it.
Exactly. It amplifies everything, right? Like it just makes everything feel bigger, right?
Yes.
So I think that's really, really important to figure out a way that it is going to work for you, because there's so many ways to do it. And I think the biggest mistake people make is not having the fun, right? Because again, when you're having fun and you're feeling joyful, when you're feeling bliss and you're feeling excited, what has changed in you? It's your vibration, your frequency changes, right? And so when your frequency has been elevated, you're able to feel so much more of what you've written down, right? So I think that's the important part of what you're saying, is that there has to be that emotion attached to it. And every time you feel it and every time you think about what is it that you want to create, it's like you almost need to come out of that visualization or that meditation process as a different person.
Right.
Like it's already happened. Like, and even being grateful, like you were saying, gratitude. Like I was saying earlier, it's so easy to say I'm so grateful for the roof on over my head and the food on the table and my family and my car and all of those things. But have you ever tried to be grateful for something that you didn't have yet? Right?
Mhm.
Like you and I have talked about this,
Mhm.
like inviting something into your life that hasn't quite happened, right? And again, a lot of people will be like, well, that's crazy. Well, how does that happen? Like I want to invite, extra money into my life or whatever it is. The truth is that again, when you are grateful, so it's the brain, when you feel the emotion behind it, that feeling, creation becomes so much easier. And like you said, we can get into a lot of detail. We can get into a lot of science about how we pull things in, right? And we can go on and talk about the quantum physics,
Yes.
but that might be a little much for maybe this conversation. But Maybe
And
this is something you and I do offline.
well, yes, because it can't, you're right. Like it just, we can go down a rabbit hole with it in a good way. Like, but it's a lot of, and I like the whole, just tying it in, we become what we believe is when we know thyself, and we know, we talk about being smart, and we talk about, just the belief, or I'm beautiful, or, just being comfortable with the truth of who you are.
Mhm.
And it sounds easier said than done. Or I'm a person, creating boundaries, for instance, people that walk away from situations and they're not happy with the way they handled it, but, they wish they had said this or did that. We become what we believe because we didn't have a voice. And all of a sudden, waking up to the idea that we have a voice, and going into that visualization of being somebody that has a voice, who's heard, who's understood. A lot of people feel misunderstood, like just simple things like that. And being able to feel and become that person where you understand yourself and you feel very understood within your own sphere, that all of a sudden you attract people that understand you the way you understand yourself. But repeating to ourselves over and over again that I'm always misunderstood, or, that's what we're recreating over and over again.
And I think you totally hit the nail on the head. Like, even when we talk about, manifesting and raising our vibration, right? The point is to keep our vibration, or raise our vibration every day a little bit more, where we're at a constant, right? So today I want to be at a better vibration tomorrow than I am today.
Mm,
But you know what? You are right, because I do believe that the best way for you to be able to manifest and to keep your vibration at a certain level is by actually doing the inner work, right? So if it means that you're starting off with affirmations because you need to feel love within yourself, right? So love in itself, love is the frequency of love is 528 hertz, according to Power and Force, right? Power versus Force, which
versus
you
force,
know,
right? Yeah.
right? So in order for you to start manifesting, you almost have to be at that level where you love who you are as an
Mhm.
individual, because the truth is that you can the truth is that that self-awareness opens up that gateway to abundance, right? Like that, right? So when you are affirming who you are and how much you love yourself and how wonderful you are and valued you are and how appreciated you are, and when you can tap into gratitude, I'm so grateful that I've gone through this experience. Like, I'm
Right.
so grateful that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, so you don't realize why things happen, but you're like, I'm so happy that this has happened for me. What am I supposed to learn, right? So that self-awareness starts increasing, and as soon as you
Mhm.
become more self-aware, you also start realizing what you want more of in your life.
Absolutely. I love the way you just said that. Yes.
So I think, so even in your whole idea about manifesting, right? A lot of people think, oh, I want to manifest, $1 million. But the truth is that, you know what? Yeah, you probably could do it. But then, is it going to make you happy? Is it going to fulfill you? Yeah, short term, yes, of course. I
That's
could pay my mortgage off, I could go on a beach.
so many things we can do.
So many things we can do. But at the end of the day, I think manifesting has to start with self awareness. I think it's understanding what you want to manifest and why you want to do it. Um, and really recognizing who you are. Like, that self love is so important, right? So, self love, like I said, automatically raises your vibration, right?
Right.
So, if you're
It's
starting,
interesting. Like when we talk about the science aspect of it, when we look at little terminologies like, we can't change what we can't acknowledge. And I always say, trick your brain, because we are taught as a society to acknowledge the unhealthy stuff, the bad stuff, the messy stuff. When we're looking at recreating, or not even create, I don't even like the word recreating necessarily, because when we're evolving into the truth, into the love of who we are, to know thyself, acknowledge, it's understanding that we can't change what we can't acknowledge. It's time for us to start acknowledging the greatness within us.
Mhm.
And when we can understand that, again, it goes back to the science. It's just another way, it's another entry point into changing the chemical makeup of our body and sending different signals and feeling different emotions. Like all of a sudden we can't, oh yeah, I didn't acknowledge the fact that I'm smart. I didn't acknowledge the fact that, I'm talented or whatever that case is. We're acknowledging it and we're giving a different feeling. The one thing I like from the science, I don't know if you've done this, but I actually put up a picture of the brain and neurons and the heart and understood. I wanted to, because I'm scientific with the spirituality, I wanted to understand when I was going to visualizations and meditations, I wanted to have that picture of all the firing going on.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's visualization, right? That is exactly what visualization is, for you to be able to envision your neurons firing and
Yes.
creating this amazing new network. In fact, there's another scientist another researcher that I've studied as well, Dr. Norman Deutsch. Are you familiar with him?
No, no.
So, The Brain That Changes Itself. He wrote this book, and in his book, they did functional MRIs on individuals that were, one, thinking about an activity, and then functional MRIs on people that were actually physically doing the activity. And what he found was the brain fired exactly the same
The same,
way.
right.
The same way. So you can sit here and close your eyes and pretend you're playing the piano, and then physically go and play the piano, and your brain waves would be exactly the same. The way that your brain fires is exactly the same. So his whole idea was that the brain doesn't know the difference. The brain
Mhm.
doesn't know the difference if you're actually physically engaged in an activity or if you're just imagining it. So,
Right.
and I've seen this time and time again. And when I've watched the Olympics and whatnot, I've noticed I've noticed athletes, again, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she won the gold medal at the last Winter Olympics. She was an American skier, and she was at the top of the hill, and she was doing moguls. And while she was waiting for her to go down, you could see her head bopping, like her head. She was actually going through the motions of going through the moguls in her head. And so again, she has just created that entire feeling and that entire experience in her head. So when she's going down the moguls, it's like, I've already done this. I've done this 1,000 times in my head.
Right.
Right?
And when you're saying that, it triggers my kids, because my kids are gymnasts, and when there was something that my one daughter used to do before she'd run down the vault runway, and it
Mhm.
was like this cryptic kind of thing with her body. And finally, I said, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, I'm doing it before I get there." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So you're right. It does work.
Yeah, you know what? It's remarkable. Like I said, for me, all about the science. When we are looking at functional MRIs, or not me in particular, but Dr. Norman Deutsch, when he's looking at functional MRIs and telling you the brain is firing exactly the same way, whether you think about something or whether you're actually physically doing it. I mean, isn't that remarkable? Like, this is how powerful our brains are. Like,
Right, absolutely.
so
We've got 10 minutes left in the show,
again,
and I'm like, this is a topic that I don't like. I feel that needs to be spoken about so much for us to be able to bring this information to fuse the two worlds. Because I think that there's a lot of talk about the whole spiritual path and the science path, and it's not fully fused together yet. It's just making headway, it's just
mhm.
coming to light. And I feel that a platform having more of these type conversations is so essential. I so appreciate you bringing this up this evening.
I'm so glad. I
Yeah,
think it's information that people need to hear.
yeah,
It doesn't matter where you are on your journey. And if you're even on a journey yet, like a self discovery journey or whatever it is, but it's so important. I think it's encouraging for people to know that others have done it. And yeah, it sucks, right? Like, let's be honest. Like, it's like no walk in the park, but the liberation that you feel.
Absolutely.
right?
You talk
I
about
agree.
that whole reality in the MRI, and I'm taking it back just a minute because I just want to add this in, and I'd like you to, elaborate on it a lot more. I know out of my own personal experience, I've gone into a meditation, brought myself down to a theta state, and in the process of going into the void and moving myself into another reality, I am shocked of how when you wake up, you actually are the environment that you wake up to is very unfamiliar to you, speaking out of personal experience.
Mhm.
And I did that, and 14 days later, and then I wrote it out. I came out of the meditation and I wrote it out. Like, it was amazing. And I literally wrote out, I love my new life. This is what it looked like. But I was writing it as if it already existed. 14 days later, the exact thing happened.
Yeah. It's remarkable. It is remarkable. Like,
Yes.
and believe me, I totally know what you mean. Going into the void, going into that space where you're nothing, like you're just energy. Like it's almost like you've left a physical body. It's a crazy space to be in. It's my favorite space to be in.
It is so and I have to say to the audience, like, I've had this conversation in previous shows where meditation hasn't been very easy for me over the years. It has been a very difficult process. I could sit down, my thoughts would wander, everything. I wasn't able to do it. And I was persistent with it and I kept at it. I put it away for a little bit, a few years, come back. Long and short of the story is I remember going into this meditation, and it's like yesterday that I did it. And my whole intuitive body was saying, let go, stop being a mom, so let go of everything, like just let go of life. And I floated. And if I say to anybody that knew me, if I could do this, anybody could do this, because I floated. But the weight that was lifted off my body, because all of a sudden I gave myself permission to let myself go, let it all go. I'm not a wife, I'm not a mother, I'm not on this earth. I just let it go and went into this void space. And I was free. That energy you talk about, the sense of freedom, I could breathe. And then in that moment, I moved myself into what I wanted. 14 days later, it happened.
Wow. It's just amazing. I really hope that more people begin to meditate and they give up the fear of I can't keep my mind still. Because it is pure bliss. And you know me, I've been meditating for the last 23 years. So again, when nobody, is it 23 years? When I was
She's ahead of her time.
25, yeah, I was 25 when I started meditating, and listen, and even still, like so many years later, I am now beginning to experience it on a completely different level, completely different level. So what you're talking about, been there, done that. I can't wait to go back.
Right. You just it becomes a space that you really appreciate being in. And the best way that I can put it in nothing, even if it's not for creation process of manifesting, just for the physical health of your body. Just allowing yourself to go into that space, into that void, and letting it all go, and giving your body a chance just to be nothing for a moment.
And I think that
The health benefits.
Sorry, Tanya, I was just going to say, I think that
No, go ahead.
comes for a lot of people. But like I said, I think initially it has to be the science for them. Like, understand that, you know what, you have more cognitive control. When you meditate, your amygdala shrinks, your prefrontal cortex grows. Like, and I think that when they just automatically start noticing the difference in their response to life in general, right? Just in life, like you think it, right? When you know exactly what I'm talking about, you come out of a deep state of meditation and your response to life is just so much more relaxed. You feel like you can handle things, and it doesn't matter what comes your way. You feel like you can handle things
Hmm.
so much better.
So I don't know how you feel, but it's almost like, and you hear it all the time where people say they go through their day easier and they feel more protected, they feel more guided,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. And it's almost as if I call it the surrender piece, where you go into that meditation and you just surrender yourself to life. But here's the difference. Like, I think people look at surrender as a give up. And it's actually the opposite. I'm going to put it from a perspective of health. People surrendering to whatever the fate of my health is, it will be. But the feeling is you're surrendering to the fate of your health being good health.
Mhm.
So that feeling actually comes out not from a negative perspective, like, well, whatever happens, happens. It's like, no, there's that trusting where you've resigned, you've conceded, you've submerged, you've accepted
Yes.
good health. So I surrender to the fate of my health. But the feeling, when you're saying those words, the feeling is great health. You trust that you're well taken care of.
That's right. Exactly. And that's the beauty of meditation, right? Like, you get to create whatever you want,
Right.
right? And be careful what you wish for.
Right. I'm a little triggered by that only from this space. I used to be like, oh my gosh, be careful what I wish for. Something bad's going to happen. And I finally woke up one day and I was like, be careful what you wish for. It just might come true. But I'm like, yes, this is great. I want it to come true. Because I always have this narrative in my mind that everything I do is with great health, harmony, honesty. Like, I always surround myself with those type thoughts, that everything that happens for my greater and higher good, and the greater and higher good of those around me, with love, good health, and at the betterment of everybody else.
Exactly. And that's not absolving the fact that something can happen in your life that might be perceived as negative, right? Like, you
Yes,
get into a car
absolutely.
accident or whatever. But
Right.
again, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. What is it that you need to learn
Learn.
in
Right.
this moment? And again, I don't really believe in coincidences either. I feel like things are divinely planned out. And if you're waking up every day and you're saying, I hope that everything that happens today is for my higher good, for me to evolve, for me to be better, then, be ready. And when it happens, you might be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. But then you'll be like, oh yeah, I asked for it this morning.
Right. And I'm taking care of even in the midst of this little mess.
That's right. Exactly. So, right. Be careful what you wish for. And it's beautiful. It's like such a beautiful thing when you can actually look at things in that in that perspective,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
it's okay. You're angry, you're upset for a moment. That's all right. But then when you come back to, yourself and realize, oh, this has happened for my greater good. What can I learn? How can I use this? It just makes everything flow so much easier. There's no
Right.
resistance.
And when I didn't understand that, we've got 2 minutes, and I'm gonna. When I didn't understand that, and things would happen, I'd be like, "But this is not what I wished for." And I was like, "Okay, but what do I have to learn? This is the process I have to go through to get that."
Right.
When I understood that, I have to tell you what I did notice eventually is I didn't stay in that space for very long.
Mhm.
But when I wasn't awake to it, I would stay in that state for a prolonged period of time.
Mhm.
So, when just understanding that we don't have to stay in that state, at least for me, we don't have to stay in this space for very long, as long as we're awake to the lesson and what we've got to learn, or how this is the process to get to where we want to be.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's also, again, a part of the self-awakening, self-awareness process, right? Just, hey,
Right.
things don't happen to me, they happen for me.
Right.
Right.
One last nugget for our audience that you'd like to share this evening.
Do whatever you can to build the love for yourself.
Yes.
Right?
Thank
I
you.
would say focus on loving you, every aspect of it, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and wherever you are, you're like, it's a great place to start.
Right. Yes. Yes. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening and touching on the scientific aspect. Certainly not what I thought was going to happen, but definitely a treat.
Oh, thank you. And I guess that's what happens. The conversation starts rolling, and you get what you get, and you don't get upset, Tanya.
No, well, you know what? No, not at all. I love this because this is about this was exactly what the show is: real talk, real people, real issues, real events. It's about candidness, and this is the private conversations that we would have offline
Right.
that we're sharing with the world. So I appreciate the just the candidness and just the randomness of it all. So thank you all for joining us this evening and tuning in. I want to remind everybody that they are to go to www.drsharrai.ca. She is the co-founder of also of the Empowerment Project. She is an empowerment facilitator, chiropractor, and a corporate wellness specialist. A treat this evening for us all. You guys all go out there, play back this tape, and find out all those books that Dr. Rai mentioned to us, to go read them. Let's incorporate the scientific aspect into our spiritual work and know thyself that we're doing. I'm Tanya Ricketts, your host. Visit thetanyaexperience.com to take your life to the next level. All right. Good evening, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow. See you.